We continue to study the words of my perfect teacher. Previously, we studied the 8 states without freedom and understood that the nature of freedom is to have the opportunity to practice Dharma. Now we are going to reflect on the particular advantages related to Dharma. Reflecting on the particular advantages related to Dharma. This section includes 2 parts, the 5 individual advantages and the 5 circumstantial advantages. 2.1 The 5 individual advantages. Nagarjuna summarized the 5 individual advantages as the following. Born as a human, in a central place, with all one's faculties, without a conflicting lifestyle and with faith in the Dharma. First, the advantage of support. Support refers to human life. Without a human life, it would be impossible to encounter the Dharma. Therefore, this human life is the advantage of support. While entrapped in the boundless ocean of suffering and samsara, it is of foremost importance to have a human life that enables Dharma practice. Otherwise, even if the Buddha has appeared, the Dharma still exists, and qualified teachers are giving teachings. Without a human body, it is not possible to encounter the Dharma, receive the profound pith instructions, and understand the meaning of doctrines. It is extremely difficult to get a human life. So now that we are free from the 8 states without freedom and have the 10 particular advantages related to Dharma, we should feel fortunate from the bottom of our hearts. This human body is essential for Dharma practices. If one is reborn in the God realm, the hedonistic indulgences there far exceed those of the human realm. Nowadays, some millionaires think their wealth allows them to enjoy heavenly pleasures, which is not true. The pleasures of the God realm are hardly exhausted, which is unlike the human realm, where everything can be debilitated. Moreover, whatever gods or devas in the God realm want will automatically and instantly appear by means of visualization. When they want to eat, gourmet food appears. When they want to dress, heavenly clothing arises. When they want to meditate, they can easily enter a meditative state. Therefore, they live a much happier life than humans. In comparison, we humans experience unceasing suffering due to our attachment to this human body. For example, sometimes we struggle with insomnia, and we lie in bed trying to force sleep but just become more awake. However, when we sit up straight trying to meditate, we become drowsy. Beings in the God realm don't have such afflictions as humans do. They enjoy much more pleasure than we do. However, they lack Dharma. Therefore, all the 1,000 Buddhas of the good Kalpa attain Buddhahood in human form. The following cases are never encountered. This Buddha attained Buddhahood in the form of Indra, or that Buddha attained Buddhahood in the form of Brahma, or that Buddha attained Buddhahood in the form of Vishnu. Having a human form provides a favorable condition for us to practice the Dharma. There are very few gods with a supreme affinity who occasionally encounter the Dharma. Yet they simply hear the teachings, but hardly generate renunciation towards samsara or bodhicitta towards sentient beings. Therefore, you must acknowledge your great merits. In this life, not only do you have a human life, but you have also encountered Mahayana Buddhism and attended hundreds of Dharma classes and received all the transmissions. Is this possible for beings of other realms? Not at all. Hungry ghosts and other non-humans sometimes want to find a qualified teacher and listen to teachings. But when they finally have the opportunity, they attend the first class but start to get distracted during the second one. Their illusory bodies move faster than humans' bodies, so once they succumb to external temptations, they follow along. They can barely remain in the same place for a long time to listen to teachings, so they rarely receive all the transmissions. In fact, non-humans like hungry ghosts often come and listen to teachings in front of a qualified teacher. It's just that we cannot see them. Such things happened during the Buddha's time and continue at present. Even if just an ordinary Dharma teacher or a tutor is giving teachings, without doubt some non-humans are listening. However, non-humans lack the advantage of support and therefore cannot receive the complete transmissions as humans do. A human form is the most suitable for listening to teachings. That's why the 1,000 Buddhas of the good Kalpa all attain enlightenment in the forms of humans. This is an extraordinary interdependence. As said in The Way of the Bodhisattva, having a human life is beyond our expectations, even in a dream, so we should feel very fortunate. The human body, when used properly as a Dharma vessel, is far more precious than vessels made of gold, silver, or jade. It is a great pity if we don't use our human life properly, and even worse, if we use it for wrongdoing. However, people of the degenerate age don't appreciate the precious human life. They are unwilling to follow a sequential order and practice the Dharma properly. Worse yet, nowadays some teachers don't even teach the Dharma properly. Recently, there is a hearsay among Buddhists in northeast China about a so-called teacher's assertion, "You don't have to practice preliminaries, ngondro. Just give me 600 Chinese yuan, and you are exempted." This hearsay surfaced 2 years ago. When I heard it again this time, I was a bit surprised. On the one hand, given the surging price inflation, how could this exemption fee remain unchanged? On the other hand, I also felt quite concerned, not because some ngondro practitioners leave for that teacher, but because upon hearing the ngondro exemption, quite a few Buddhists earnestly persuaded others, saying, "You don't have to practice preliminaries. That is too tiring. That guru offers a shortcut. All you have to do is pay 600 Chinese yuan, and without making tiresome effort, you can achieve realization in a snap of the fingers. If you don't have money, I'll pay for you." They even encouraged some monastics, saying, "You should follow his method too. I can offer you the money. That teacher is so kind. He told us doing 100,000 prostrations is too much work, so he can exempt us from all the ngondro practices if we pay 600 Chinese yuan." Alas, they are indeed ignorant. What is more pitiful is that many people listen to them and flock to that teacher. Some of them used to follow the practice sequence and aspire to finish their ngondro practices, but now they just abandon their ngondro practice. These days, many people do whatever it takes to make a fortune. It is understandable if they want to be rich, but their advocacy brings great obstacles to others and impacts Tibetan Buddhism negatively. Eminent masters of Tibetan Buddhism, including Padmasambhava, Lama Tsongkhapa, Sakya Pandita, Longchenpa, Mipham Rinpoche, and the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, all advocated the practice sequence and persuaded disciples to first complete preliminaries. It says in the words of my perfect teacher that lineage disciples of Jigme Lingpa and Jigme Jalwai Nyugu should do 100,000 prostrations and recite the mantra of Padmasambhava 10 million times. One practitioner at Larung Gar has been practicing diligently for years and so far has done 10 million prostrations. If you dissuade others from practicing ngondro for the sake of collecting money for yourself, it will bring very negative impacts to Buddhism. It's not surprising that in the degenerate age, everyone, be they lay practitioners or monastics, has their own respective methods of collecting alms or money. But it doesn't make any sense if a teacher refutes the systematic practice just for their own agenda. At first, I wanted to talk to that teacher on behalf of Larung Gar or just myself. After all, the practice of charging a ngondro exemption fee has never been heard of. If this teacher is a great, accomplished master, then I can understand why he might choose to exempt his disciples from ngondro and just give pointing out instructions. It happened in the past that when a teacher had superior capacities and a disciple had extraordinary faculties, the disciple skipped ngondro and attained realization just through the teacher's pointing out instructions. This was the case for Padmasambha and Vimalamitra. But even then, those teachers never asked their disciples to pay a ngondro exemption fee. Even if the exemption fee of 600 Chinese yuan was also on the price tag during Padmasambhava's time, I am afraid there must be a price increase now. Otherwise, it is not following the market trend. The audience is laughing. In short, I am strongly against such a claim from any teacher. Whoever the teacher is, he must be unhappy hearing my criticism, and so must be his followers. Nevertheless, I have to say this, even directly to their face. I hope these followers can carefully examine whether ngondro practices had ever been replaced by money in the traditions of lineage masters in Tibetan Buddhism. Maybe I am not fully informed, but I have never encountered such a replacement viewpoint throughout the many years I have been studying the Dharma and reading the biographies of eminent masters. I've read almost all the history books on Tibetan Buddhism, including the Great History of Dzogchen, the Red Annals, the White Annals, the Blue Annals, the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, the ornament covering all Jambudvipa, and the sections introducing lineage masters in the texts of Longchen Nyingtik and Vima Nyingtik. In all of these, I've never read any instruction saying ngondro practices can be replaced by an exemption fee. Therefore, while benefiting from having a human life, the advantage of support, we must pay attention to the way we practice the Dharma. I hope you will follow the appropriate sequence and practice steadily. For example, when meditating on the precious human life, don't simply pay lip service. Instead, from the bottom of your heart, you should believe, this human life of mine is so precious. I must use this human form to practice the Dharma. The way of the Bodhisattva says, for like the supreme substance of the alchemists, it takes our impure flesh and makes of it the body of a Buddha, jewel beyond all price. The human life is so priceless. It is a great pity if you use your human body to commit wrongdoings, especially those actions that bring harm to oneself and to Buddhism. It would be even more unfortunate if the long-standing great traditions of Buddhism were damaged by certain persons. The power of Mara is very strong in the degenerate age. Authentic Dharma taught by 100 qualified teachers might not be accepted by people, whereas worldly Dharma, preached by one person, might attract a big crowd of followers. The deluded minds of worldly people resonate very well with Mara, so worldly Dharma endorsed by Mara is consistent with ordinary people's mindsets. You may reflect on the present reality. Upon hearing the name of Amitabha, many people may generate no faith, while after hearing a pop song about lust or anger, many people immediately turn into crazy fans. When a Dharma master announces plans to teach the Amitabha Sutra in a city, it is already very good if a few thousand people show up. But when a superstar announces a concert, the concert venue will be fully packed by a passionate audience, and some of them even faint out of excitement. Sometimes, when I see such a concert scene on television, I think, alas, how ignorant these people are. The world we live in is like a dream or an illusion. If these people continue to be like this, their hallucination will lead them nowhere even more. It is so sad that many people don't realize this. So please be cautious about Mara's power. I'm not particularly concerned about any consequences when saying this. It is okay if others bad-mouth me because an ordinary person like me is not free of wrongdoings, so it makes sense to be criticized by others. But when seeing or hearing a misdeed, I must point it out for the sake of protecting the Dharma when it is absolutely necessary. It is not right if I only give sweet talks. We are not Mahayanists if we contribute nothing to the propagation of the Dharma during our rather short lifespan. Many monastics at Larungar will become abbots or give teachings one day. I am a bit concerned whether you will behave in ways inappropriate to the Dharma and whether you will, with your tainted thoughts, pollute the lineage transmission, which is as untainted as pure gold. So please, be extra cautious about this issue. Meanwhile, I wish for you to apply your wisdom eyes to discern what to do and what not to do, when you hear pseudo-Dharma teachings. Some people are quite unintelligent. When they overhear someone saying, "This is very good," they will simply conform to the group. Such behaviors are truly pathetic. It is not easy for you to finally embark on the bright path, but if you lose your direction at this juncture, you may experience a significant setback. Second, the advantage of place. Had you been born in a remote place where there is no Dharma, you would not have encountered it. However, you were born in a central region in terms of the Dharma, and so you have the advantage of place. If a person lives in a border place without Dharma, he won't even have the opportunity to take refuge, let alone receive the Buddha's teachings. Now that you are living in a central region where Dharma exists and thrives, you should feel very fortunate. Meanwhile, you are also living in a good era. If you were living in the 1960s or 1970s in China, be it mainland or the Tibetan region, where Buddhism was destroyed in the upheaval, many of you wouldn't have had the opportunity to encounter the Dharma. Khenpo Kiwang, who gave me many Dharma teachings, once said, "The great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche and Khenpo Chocha of Sertar are both great practitioners. During the political upheaval of the Cultural Revolution, when Dharma practice was forbidden, many people were too afraid to recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra, but Khenpo Chocha kept on reading at least 20 pages of Buddhist texts every day, and Phuntsok Rinpoche not only read Buddhist texts but also gave teachings at the risk of his life. At that time, when the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche was herding yaks, his disciples followed him high onto the mountain, where Phuntsok Rinpoche secretly gave teachings in a cave. The disciples took turns staying outside the cave as security guards on duty. The great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche taught in many such caves near Larungar during the most perilous times. Even during the turmoil, these great masters never stopped studying the Dharma. From childhood to their passing, they lived a great life through hearing, contemplating, practicing, and teaching the Dharma. Khenpo Kiwang used to say, "While I dare not claim to be like the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche and Khenpo Chocha, I never once gave up the Dharma during those perilous times." In comparison, nowadays, some Buddhists become overly alert when spotting a vague sign of danger. For example, when a staff person from the local police station asked some practitioners to fill out a questionnaire, they were so scared that they stopped the group study. I heard that last year, a group of householders were conducting a group study session when someone knocked on the door. Many panicked and ran away, but it turned out the person knocking was just a property manager coming to collect utility expenses. Even if he were a policeman making a routine inquiry, what could be so fearful about it? We are fortunate to have the opportunity to study the Dharma in such a great era and concentrate on study every day with no worries. We have been studying the way of the Bodhisattvas together for a long time, and nothing unfavorable has happened, except that a few very timid persons were startled by minor challenges. Such individuals regress easily at the slightest obstacle, let alone the 10-year turmoil of the Cultural Revolution. So while we have the advantage of place, we also need to rely on our own effort and strength to study the Dharma. Thus, we should introspect to understand our true capabilities. We should reflect on how we will treat the Dharma when the political or social environment changes. I particularly enjoy the stories of past practitioners because they lived for the Dharma, paid no attention to the 8 worldly concerns, remained immune to social, political, and economic turmoil, and were wholeheartedly devoted to the Dharma and sentient beings. Many senior lay people in Tibetan and mainland areas of China are also exemplary. Their world is not filled with things other than the Dharma. Sadly, practitioners of the new generation are busy pursuing wealth and fame on a daily basis. Although they have taken refuge and are now Buddhists, they don't truly dedicate themselves to the Dharma. so their study and practice are only superficial, lacking a solid understanding. Therefore, you should reflect again and again, what is the role of Dharma in my mind? Eminent masters of the past went through countless hardships in pursuit of the Dharma. We are deeply moved by their determination and at the same time feel somewhat embarrassed about ourselves. Now that we have such a great opportunity and favorable conditions, as long as we are willing to study the Dharma, we can always access the teachings. Third, the advantage of possessing the sense faculties. Lacking full sense faculties would impede your ability to practice the Dharma. If you are free from such impairments, you have the advantage of possessing the sense faculties. In this world, many people become vegetative, paralyzed, visually impaired, audibly impaired, mute, or suffer from other disabilities. More than 80 million Chinese people are physically challenged. Many of these limitations prevent them from studying the Dharma, so they cannot fully receive the teachings. We are very fortunate to have all 5 sense faculties intact. Have you ever reflected on this? I myself often think this way. The Buddha said a practitioner should have all the sense faculties intact. It is indeed the case. Otherwise, even if a person intends to study the Dharma, their incomplete faculties do not allow them to do so. They are not capable of studying and practicing the Dharma. Thanks to the merit we accumulated from previous lives, we have intact faculties. Even though some of you may not see or hear well, you are still able to receive the Dharma, unlike severely handicapped disabled persons who are incapable of receiving and practicing the Dharma. Therefore, each of us should appreciate the advantage of possessing functioning sense faculties. Fourth, the advantage of intention. If you had a conflicting lifestyle, you would be constantly engaged in negative actions and in conflict with the Dharma. However, because you are now aspiring to do positive actions, this is the advantage of intention. Some people who were once good practitioners later encountered negative influences from misguided teachers, so that their minds became polluted by wrong views, and they started to commit wrongdoings. Some people used to be diligent monastics who received empowerments, upheld precepts, and conducted ascetic practices. But later they were defeated by bad karmic forces surfacing in their mind streams, and they disrobed and committed innumerable negative actions, such as killing and stealing to make a living. These are cases of a conflicting lifestyle. We can only feel deeply sorry for this kind of person, thinking nothing can help them, not even if the Buddha appears in front of them, because they don't regret at all what they have done. Some householders had great faith in the Guru and the 3 jewels at the very beginning, but later they abandoned everything. They even claim, "So be it if I fall into the lower realms. Whatever happens, I will never study the Dharma anymore. I will burn all my Dharma books." Such statements are quite disturbing. These people are so ignorant that they completely disregard the law of karma, in the same way a robber disregards criminal law. Therefore, we should always pray to the Guru and the 3 jewels, wishing we will never generate such wrong views. We should think we would rather die sooner than have such views arise in us. I often think, as long as my mind is not controlled by the terrifying Mara, my faith in the 3 jewels won't regress in this life. Why do I think this way? Because my faith is not just lip service, it comes from the bottom of my heart. Just as I am convinced that fire is hot, I deeply believe that the Buddha is omniscient and the Dharma is unparalleled. I'll never regress in my faith. There are Buddhists who haven't studied the Dharma for long. Even if they've taken ordination, changing into a monastic itself might not help them overcome their wrong views and intentions. If they don't have a solid understanding of the teachings, even if they've shaved their head, the hair will again grow back, and they can return to secular life in no time. If they disrobe, it only takes 3 months for the hair to grow to a length no different from that of a non-monastic. The ordination scars on the heads of monastics of Chinese Buddhism can also be removed, thanks to science and technology. Therefore, the monastic appearance and the ordination scars cannot define a person's life. What really matters is whether a practitioner has uncontrived faith. It is only with such faith that their practice in this life is assured. This also applies to householders. Nowadays, many people easily convert to Buddhism and also easily leave the path. Why? It is because the Dharma hasn't penetrated their minds. Presently, the most important task for Buddhists, including monastics and householders, is to spread the Dharma. Some monasteries don't undertake this task well. Although many tourists visit the monasteries, no Dharma teaching is offered there. Except for offering incense and worshiping the Buddha, many believer visitors don't pursue the Dharma. They are just able to establish a good affinity. As such, there is no way that the Dharma can merge into their minds. Therefore, monasteries should build more Dharma halls where teachings can be given. Of course, it is a great pity if there is a nice Dharma hall, but no one teaches, or at most someone teaches once a month. If I were the abbot, I would first build a Dharma hall where teachings are offered every day. If I were able, I would teach every day. If I were not able, I would invite capable teachers to give teachings on a daily basis. Thus, visitors from everywhere would have the opportunity to study and understand the Dharma. Many people are not knowledgeable about the Buddha's basic teachings, let alone the profound ones. Recently, I watched a video of a famous Dharma teacher giving a teaching, during which he had to explain scriptural evidence concerning the refutation of production from four extremes, one of the great logical arguments of the middle way. He offered explanations for more than 10 minutes, but didn't explain it correctly, so I stopped the video. In the video, that Dharma teacher commented, "This is too profound. It is hard to understand." In fact, this logical argument is not so difficult. As long as the Dharma teacher explained it clearly, educated householders and university students could easily understand how to refute production by means of one of the following four extremes: self, other, both, or neither. It is a pity that the Dharma teacher gave the wrong explanations, so this logical argument didn't make sense to many audience members. It is a great pity that even a Dharma teacher doesn't really understand the Dharma. Of course, this is an isolated case that doesn't happen to every Dharma teacher, so it doesn't mean that all Dharma teachers hardly know the Dharma. Without receiving an education in the Dharma, some people think their understanding is right, yet their knowledge doesn't capture the true meaning of the Buddha's teachings. It is very important to have a Dharma professional to give teachings on topics including karma and emptiness. Of course, simply wearing a monastic robe does not qualify a teacher to be a professional. They should have received systematic training from a formal Buddhist group or institute. Otherwise, such a teacher may not be very well versed in Dharma, but happens to be famous, and people are attracted by his fame and feel very lucky to have encountered him, including just for taking a photo with him. These people believe his teachings are errorless, so they listen to him attentively, but, well, I'd better stop here. The above is about the advantage of intention. As long as we have a thorough understanding of the Buddha's teachings, such intention will not easily regress. Fifth, the advantage of faith. If you lack faith in the Buddha's teachings, you will not be drawn to the Dharma. Now that you have the ability to turn your mind to the Dharma, you have the advantage of faith. Once we understand the supreme qualities of the Dharma, our veneration and faith will surely arise. This basic rule also applies to a worldly person. For example, between two college students, one is a distinguished student with great qualities, and the other is inferior, so naturally the second student will respect the first one unless the latter refuses to do so. Similarly, among all the explanations on the truth of everything, the doctrines of Buddhism are unparalleled. If we deeply resonate with this, we will have faith in the Dharma. Of course, the prerequisite for faith to arise is your affinity with Buddhism in previous lives. Without such affinity, even if the Dharma is absolutely true and cannot be refuted by any reasoning, some people nevertheless generate no faith. For example, some university students and intellectuals have good character and manners, but whenever they encounter Dharma, they simply say, "I don't believe it." When asked why, they answer, "Because I don't believe it." Such an attitude is not uncommon nowadays. Therefore, a good affinity established from previous lives is indispensable for the arising of faith. The Dharma is supreme, but one cannot turn one's mind to it without faith. Everyone present here must have faith. Otherwise, you would not have come to Larungar in pursuit of Dharma. Sometimes I think that many of you must have a great karmic affinity to have become monastics at Larungar. Otherwise, given your worldly education and the influence from your parents, family, neighbors, and friends, it would be hardly possible for you to be studying the Dharma. Almost all Tibetans are Buddhists, so it is easier for a newborn Tibetan to believe in Buddhism in their course of development. Although most of you were not born in such a Buddhist environment, now your ripened merit has driven you to become a monastic or receive layperson's precepts. It is all due to your affinity and faith. Otherwise, you would not have entered the doorway of Buddhism. Of course, having faith alone is not enough. Based on faith, we use our human form to practice Dharma. Ronchoje, a great enlightened master of Tibetan Buddhism, offered a twofold instruction to his disciples right before his parinirvana, saying, "From now on, I hope you will seriously hear and contemplate the Dharma in the daytime, and diligently practice the Dharma at night." The great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often quoted this instruction, telling us, "During the day, you must seriously debate, discuss, listen, and give teachings. You should discuss the Buddha's teachings with peers and disclose and analyze your doubts in front of a wise person. This will help you dispel all your wrong views and doubts. During the night, when everything is quiet, you should meditate on the content of teachings you received." This is the instruction from our lineage master, and we should follow it and apply it throughout our whole life accordingly. To summarize, because these 5 advantages of support, place, possessing the sense faculties, intention, and faith need to be complete with regard to one's own makeup, they are referred to as the 5 individual advantages. You should examine whether you have all 5 advantages. Dharma students who are listening to this teaching should have all of them. Why? Because if one of the 5 advantages was missing, it would be impossible for you to attend this teaching. For example, if you didn't have the advantage of faith, you wouldn't feel any inclination towards the Dharma. If you were born in a border place, you wouldn't encounter the Dharma in this life, and so you would have no opportunity to understand the Dharma. As far as place is concerned, as I said, the place in the current time is the best for studying the Dharma. As for me, I started my study at a fairly young age when the Cultural Revolution was over. Over the past 20 years, religious policies and the political atmosphere have been quite stable with no major upheaval, so my Dharma study has been quite smooth and fulfilling. Although once in a while I encountered challenges such as emotional turbulence, physical discomfort, cold, cough, or diarrhea, these things were all minor. Overall, everything had been fine. You should know that it is very rare to have the opportunity to study the Dharma for so long. Even just studying it for 5 or 10 years in one's lifetime is already very precious. Sadly, many people nowadays don't pursue the Dharma. The above briefly covers the 5 individual advantages. We now study each of them in greater depth. The advantage of support. It is absolutely indispensable to be a human in order to practice the Dharma. Imagine, instead, that you were not in a human form but took on the highest form of life in the 3 lower realms, an animal, even the most beautiful and highly prized one known to man. If someone told you, recite Om Mani Padme Hum once and you will attain Buddhahood, you would be completely unable to understand the instruction or grasp its meaning, nor would you be able to articulate a response. Of course, the Dharma itself has incredible blessing power, so when an animal hears the teachings, even if it doesn't understand them, the merit of hearing the Dharma may bring it to a better rebirth. There are many cases in the history of Chinese Buddhism in which animals were reborn as humans due to hearing the Dharma. For example, in the late Eastern Xin dynasty, Master De Tong from Xingguo Monastery in Jinan recited the Lotus Sutra every day. The master had been reciting the sutra, and a white-necked dirtworm near the courtyard in front of his retreat cabin had been hearing the recitation for 3 years. One day, a novice monk was weeding with a hoe and accidentally cut the dirtworm's body into 2 pieces. The monk felt very sorry and buried the dirtworm. The dirtworm was reborn as a human due to the merit of hearing the Lotus Sutra and later took ordination in a monastery. Although he was illiterate, he could fluently recite the Lotus Sutra. Whenever he was free, he would recite the sutra, and this recitation continued for more than 30 years. Later, when he heard that Master De Tong had passed into parinirvana, he thought it was time for him to leave the world as well. Then he entered parinirvana, and many auspicious signs appeared. There are also some animals that are manifestations of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. In the Ming dynasty, a scholar had a white parrot who recited the name of Avalokiteshvara and the mantra of the white Avalokiteshvara every morning. The parrot could also recite poems such as Come Away Home by Tao Yuanming 365-427, Ode on the Red Cliffs by Su Shi to 1101, and poetic works by Li Bai 701-762. One day, the parrot told the scholar, I came from the west, now I'm going back to the west. That night, the bird died in peace and took rebirth in a pure realm. There are many similar stories in The White Lotus, great biography of Buddha Shakyamuni. For example, the horse king Balaha was a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara. The fish Rohita was a manifestation of the Buddha in his causal stage. Those animals are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in animal forms to benefit sentient beings. In the Tang dynasty, there was a parrot that refused to take any food after midday. If the food was served after midday, the bird wouldn't even take a look at it from afternoon till evening. Once a householder told me, it is such a challenge to take the one-day precept. I almost starved to death. He just had to skip dinner, so it shouldn't have been so intolerable. Maybe he was used to eating regularly, so he felt hungry. I told him, a hungry ghost eats nothing for 12 years. You may reflect on this. The man complained, I am not able to visualize anything. I am so starved. When that parrot heard that Buddha Amitabha also manifested as a parrot in the Pure Land, as recorded in the Amitabha Sutra, it became even more motivated and diligently recited the name of Amitabha all day. One day, the parrot appeared sickly and unwell, and the owner realized it was about to die, so he struck a Buddhist chime to help the parrot chant the name of Amitabha. Each time the owner hit the chime, the parrot would chant the name once. After 10 recitations, the parrot died peacefully and took rebirth in Amitabha's Pure Land. There was once a Chinese starling in the Song dynasty that took rebirth in the Pure Land after chanting the name of the Buddha. There were many similar stories in Tibetan regions as well. The above-mentioned animals must have had extraordinary connections with the Dharma. But here, Patrul Rinpoche's point is that animals are usually quite dull-witted, so they cannot intentionally do anything virtuous, such as practicing the Dharma or going on retreat. We humans, even the worst of us, have no problem with taking a one-day precept, even if upholding the long-term precept is hard for us. We can always recite the Vajrasattva mantra 10,000 times, even if lifelong recitation is hard for us. Humans have such an advantage in these capabilities, which animals don't have. Even the most beautiful and highly prized animal known to man cannot recite once the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, such as the Tibetan Mastiff, that is worth up to $5 or $6 million. The dog a Japanese bought from America that is worth $10 million. And the panda couple that an American zoo bought at the cost of $250,000. These animals, however pricey they are, lack the ability to recite even a single mantra of Avalokiteshvara, intentionally perform a virtuous act, or come up with a solution when faced with imminent death like freezing. They simply lower their heads and endure, resigned to their fate. In contrast, a human, no matter how frail, would at least know how to seek shelter under a tree or in a cave, gather wood, and make a fire to stay warm. If animals don't even have this basic capability, how could they possibly think of practicing the Dharma? Despite their superior physical forms, gods and other celestial beings do not meet the requirements for taking the pratimoksha vows or the precepts of individual liberation. As a result, they cannot assimilate the Dharma in its totality.